Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the May edition of Molten Music Monthly. Well, I hope everyone is staying distant and safe out there, and as the dust has now settled on Superbooth at home, it seems that everyone is a live streamer. We're all out there now live streaming all over the place, which is awesome. There's so much more music and thought and discussion and demonstration and bits and pieces popping up all over the place. We're discovering a whole new language around broadcasting and NDIs and video capture and desktop capture and loop backing and all these other exciting things, as if having to know everything about music technology is just not enough. Anyway, coming up in this month's edition, Moog gives Subharmonicons to absolutely everyone. There's another ARP 2600 option. The wing pinger is growing. RYK Synths gives us another drum. Yaeltex, I think, will let you build your own controller. The RYK M185 is the sequencer we've all been looking for. The Vermona meloDICER beats Omsonic to the stochastic melody challenge. Make Noise gives us no control. Music Thing gives us big control. Roland is taking everything to Zenology. Behringer gives us a MonoPoly. Error Instruments has a whole bag of stuff. Arturia gives us an Oberheim to play with. Audio Damage gets vintage digital with Phosphor 3. Voltage Modular patches up to version 2. NST Modular does interesting things in 0 HP. But first, Microsoft doing something interesting, like sometimes they do. But this one is a little bit mysterious, but potentially awesome. I mean, that sums up Microsoft, I think, entirely. Really mysterious and potentially awesome. You just never know exactly how awesome it's going to be. The majority of the time it's not quite as awesome as you thought, but on occasion awesomeness does ride with these people. So what am I talking about? Well, this is called resurface. Something to do with surface, something to do with resurfacing. Do you see what they're doing here? What is it about? Well, it's an idea, it's a concept, it's something put forward by Microsoft that suggests that they want to reclaim all of those musicians who have lost gigs over the coronavirus, and to give them an opportunity to do it live on the internet. What? So live streaming, obviously. So what has Microsoft got to do with all of this, and why is it new and why is it exciting? Well, these are the mysterious bits surrounding it, really. But from what I can gather, this resurface lark is using Mixer as a live streaming platform. Now, Mixer is Microsoft's answer to Twitch. What's Twitch? Twitch is like a live streaming gaming platform. You go onto Twitch, live stream, you're gaming, you're playing Fortnite, running around, that kind of thing. It's all streamed, it's all brilliant, it's all chat, it's all lovely, and people make millions doing that kind of thing. So Mixer is Microsoft's version of that, which has the advantage of being built directly into the Xbox. So gamers can stream directly from their Xbox straight onto the internet, gather a huge bunch of fans and become massively famous. That's the plan. I mean, that's all our plans, isn't it, ultimately? So what Microsoft are putting forward with this idea is that they have put together a bunch of tools, possibly, or at the very least a blueprint for how to stream your music, to do live performance music performing on Mixer, on their streaming platform. And on the 29th of May, which is probably before this comes out, I'm going to come out at about the same time, so this may have already happened. They are doing a big reveal with a concert where a musician called Jade Bird will be performing, and then afterwards they're having a Q&A about how it was done and how it was all set up and what you have to do in order to do that yourself. Now, that in itself could be interesting, just in terms of tutorial, in terms of learning more about how to live stream on that sort of platform. But the hint, the suggestion behind the marketing is that they have some kind of system, some kind of tool, some kind of thing that's actually specifically for music performance, live performance on their Mixer live streaming platform. And that could be very interesting. Now, I posted a little article about this onto LinkedIn. I mean, I don't ever really use LinkedIn. It's just something there which I also post to. But one of the rare occasions that I got a response to a post on there was from Scott from ImageLine, who makes FL Studio. Now, FL Studio is something which is one of the few DAWs that's really embraced Windows as a platform, and there is a version that works on like Windows phones and Windows tablets and in the Windows Store. And so they are very much into the whole Microsoft thing, even though they run on other platforms. And so getting a response from him saying thanks makes me think there's something about FL Studio in this. I don't know, this is just me making stuff up, but that was a little bit of a hint, I think. Well, who knows? We're going to know all about it this time tomorrow, probably, or the next day. But I just wanted to put out there that this sounds really interesting, because all these platforms, all these streaming platforms are focused at gamers, because that's where the mass market is. And for there to be something more angled towards live performance where you want good audio, you need synchronization between musicians, between audio, visuals. You want to be able to spin in visuals and imagery as well as music and creation. If there's something that has those sorts of tools built for it, then that would be awesome. That would be completely fabulous. So we'll see. It's called RYK and you'll find it out on Mixer, mixer.com/resurface, I think. And this is all happening about 8:30 in the evening, British time, on the 29th of May. It also seems to be powered by Surface and run largely by Microsoft UK, which is all very interesting. But talking of Surface, just to mention, there has of course been the release, or the imminent release, of the Surface Book 3 and the Surface Go 2. And of course I'm inundated with questions asking me, so are they going to be any good for music? And the answer to this question, every time there's a new release of a Surface or any other laptop, is, I don't know, I'm going to have to try it. I can only try it, because you just do not know until you give it a go. Now, the Surface Go 2 looks great. I mean, I've got a Surface Go over there. I bought one myself of the original ones. It's great. It's a nice little platform. And its one main advantage over any other laptop on the planet is that it doesn't have a turbo mode. Because currently, in our current computer technology, turbo is what really messes up a laptop in terms of being able to do audio production at low latency. Because it introduces glitches into the audio when you're trying to run it, and that's of no use to anybody. So it doesn't matter how powerful it is, doesn't matter how powerful the Surface Book 3 is, if that turbo mode introduces glitches into the audio, then it's a whole waste of power for nothing. However, I have found that with the right sort of tweaking and bits and pieces, you can essentially turn off turbo mode and get it to run beautifully. With the Surface Go, doesn't have a turbo mode, it's not an issue. So it has the best chance of working straight out of the box. However, I do hope to get a Surface Go 2. It has been rumored that Microsoft will lend me one. So that's pretty awesome. Surface Book 3, very unlikely that I'll get my hands on that unless somebody out there is willing to lend me one, send me one, whatever. And then I will happily run all sorts of tests and try it out for you. But ultimately, if you're looking for a new laptop or a new Surface, then all you can do is try it and see. Use my guides. I've got tweaking guides all about the other Surfaces, which will help you tweak any new generation of Surface and get the best out of it. Antonus System have a replica ARP 2600. They're building these things based very much on the original, all analog, all authentic as you can possibly get, and it's definitely suggesting and offering an alternative to the Korg and perhaps the Behringer one. Who knows about the Behringer one? No idea what's happened to that. But in the meantime, what Antonus have done has put together this complete replica. It's a beautiful looking thing, and it's not exactly the same. What they've done, they've scaled it down a little bit, just sort of 80%, so it's a little bit less cumbersome and all imposing, but they've done other little things as well. They've built a step sequencer for it. They've built a Euro rack case which fits on top and sits within the whole framework and the look and everything else. And so they've kind of made it a less of a standalone all by itself imposing on the desk system, and made it connect with other bits and pieces. It's really clever. It's really quite interesting, and it's an authentic ARP 2600, as you are going to find. The ARP 2600 unit by itself, handle on the top, nice big case, is about 2,600 euros. But then you can add the stepbrother, it's called, which is the sequencer, as well as adding a bit more envelope, LFO, other clock dividing bits and pieces, and that sits there beautifully in front. And then sitting on the top is something they call the side carp. Sidecar, I don't know. Sits on the top is a row of Eurorack, or at least a case into which you can fit Eurorack, which sits perfectly on the top, giving you this lovely rake of a system. And that case is something in the region of €500, which is a little pricey for a single row of Eurorack case, but just the fact that it fits in with this entire system is just rather lovely. So you could end up getting the whole lot for a bit cheaper than the Korg ARP 2600. So yeah, very interesting that. The Subharmonicon is upon us. It was a bit leaked beforehand. We saw a few images of it before, and of course we knew about the one that was built as part of the VIP engineers ticket at Moog Fest a year or two ago. So we were kind of familiar with the concept and the idea, but for the launch, Moog went full Arturia on this baby. They gave one to everyone. Everyone had one. I mean, if you didn't have one, you probably would have felt really, really sad. Because everybody had one. There was 1,000 videos came at the same time. Each of them, I mean, I think it probably came with a pot plant and a piece of aged driftwood for you to sit it on so that your video looked right in order to fit in with the Moog aesthetic. I feel perhaps. But, I mean, it's an awesome thing. And the great thing about the Subharmonicon, if that's the way you say it, is that nobody really knows how to use it, and so everybody's video was really quite different. I mean, you got a 4-step sequencer times 2, so you got lots of 4-step things going on, but then there was just, bring in these bits, bring in these other bits, and wobbly these other bits, and it was brilliant. It was like a creative car crash of all these people subharmoniconing it in very, delightfully esoteric ways. It was great. It was a really fun time, I think. I have to particularly point out Gaz Williams's video, because that was just the best. That was a man fiddling with things beyond his comprehension in an awesome way. That's right up my alley, that is. It was just fiddling, and stuff started to come out, and he was loving it, and he just kept fiddling and just kept fiddling, and it just got better and better. Brilliant. I'll have that any day over far too much kind of thinking and I don't know what this does. Brilliant, Gaz. Love it. Keep doing it, mate. That was just top notch. So yeah, what is it? Oh, nobody knows. It's in the Mother 32 format, like the DFAM. You've now got these 3 things that you can have going on at once. It has, what does it have? Oh, I know, a couple of oscillators. Well, it has polyphony. That's the idea, because it has all these Subharmonicons, sub-oscillators below the oscillators, so it can play all sorts of notes all at the same time, going through, of course, a paraphonic articulation through a single filter. And so it has all these subharmonics, I suppose, which you then rhythmerize. That's not a word. You then mess about with rhythmically, right, with these sequencers and these modulations and stuff going on. Oh, I don't know what it is. It just looks quite fun. It takes you in different directions. It's not the sort of thing you're going to go and play a tune on. It's the sort of thing you're going to discover interesting sounds and drones and wobbles and bits and pieces. So yeah, go and check out Gaz's video, definitely, and then some of the others, and just sort of lose yourself in the idea that this is an interesting and different sounding instrument. And it's from Moog. I mean, their collection now of the Mother 32, the DFAM, and the Subharmonicon, it's just quite an awesome selection of weird and interesting things. This is not trying to what it is, oddly, trying to recreate something from a million years ago, but it's not just a vintage clone, it's something else. It's finding different stuff and giving you an opportunity to do things slightly weirdly. I like that. I like that a lot. Moog have also released an update to the Mother 32, which is very welcome. It messes about with the sequencer, which is no bad thing, because the sequencer was always a pain in the head. So apparently some things are easier. I mean to look into it sometime soon. And there are a few other bits and pieces in there too. Now, we saw the Wing Pinger back at Superbooth last year, I think it was. And what is it? Well, it's difficult to say. Again, it's not really, it's an interesting thing is what it is. It's using overly resonant filters in order to create tones. So it doesn't have your regular oscillator built in. It has these resonant filters built in, and those are being pinged. I think that's the ping part of it, in order to generate tones and sounds. And it's that edge of self-oscillation that you're playing with. That is, I think, where the sound generation comes from. And it was a box that looked like a nice industrial box with some big knobs on it and stuff. It looked like a load of fun. And then it kind of disappeared. But anyway, it's sort of back. It's sort of back, and it's grown. It's got a lot wider, and he's added a touch plate sort of keyboard controller to it, which is interesting. I mean, it's slightly unexpected because it's quite a traditional way of accessing the sounds, and that's kind of not traditional ways of music, and not the flavor you get from Meng and his boxes of stuff and the sort of music that he makes. The look has also evolved. It's very black and gold now, as opposed to the more Radio Shack industrial look he had previously, and that lends it more of a product. It becomes a product, I think, once you design something with that kind of aesthetic. It's starting to move beyond the fringe into something which you could see sitting on your own desktop and know how to access. And I think that's quite key with this. I think it's going to be brilliant. I'm really looking forward to videos of it in use and people getting their hands on it. It should be available sometime in the summer now, we're looking at, which is not that far away. RYK Synths have a successor to their Pico drums called Pico Drums 2, but it's nothing like the first one. Yeah, I mistakenly thought it would just be something more interesting, better samples, better bit rate, sample rate type things. But no, it's something different entirely. And so really deserves a different name. But here we are, it's the Pico Drum 2, and what does it have? It has 8 synthesis algorithms. We're talking about actually creating percussion sounds from synthesis algorithms as opposed to samples. So it's completely different. It's actually synthesis. The algorithms include things like pulse drum, noise crush, bit wangers, complex sine, space noise, I don't know, a bunch of percussion type things. This is the sign for percussion, I think. You've got a couple of parameters to play with, usually to do with tuning and envelope, and there's a bit of modulation. CV inputs are assignable, which is interesting, but you've only got the one sound. You've got the one trigger in, the one output, as opposed to the original Pico, which gave you two sounds you could use at the same time. The sound range on this is deliciously noisy, wonderfully crisp and glitchy. This is not about, some of the samples on the Pico drum are hilarious, it has to be said. And this is not about that. This is about creating electronic noise percussion. And that's awesome. And you're going to need 4 of these, 8 of these in order to make your kit. That's the only downside, is that you've only got the one sound. But other than that, awesome. A couple of those, perhaps next to a couple of alternative modules, would be a great way of increasing your percussive range. Now, we've been here before. Now, I know everybody likes to think that their idea is an original idea and no one's ever thought of it before, but there have been a lot of these custom-made modular type MIDI controllers knocking about. We've had loads of the thing. Kickstarter is packed with yet another MIDI controller that you can configure in any way you like. And do they actually ever get anywhere? Well, I don't know. Difficult to say. They don't seem to be that prolific, it has to be said. There was one a couple of years ago called the Tsunami, which had a web-based interface where you could drop different configurations together to make this little controller. You'd hit buy it and they would make it for you, ship it to you, and it's your own personal customized MIDI controller. And now we have a company called Yaeltex who are kind of doing the same thing, but they seem to be doing it bigger, better, brighter, more colorfully than anyone's done it before, and it does look pretty interesting. So again, same idea, web-based interface where you drop in all of the faders, the buttons, the dials and knobs and all the store stuff that you could possibly need. But within this, you've got wonderfully colourful buttons and rings and halos around knobs. You've got all sorts of configurations with blocks of faders or blocks of buttons, and also there's a lot of custom design going on, because previous to this they were making custom MIDI controllers, not the sort of ones where you build it yourself. You just say, I'd like something like this with this kind of graphic on the front, and they go to town on it and build it for you. Whereas this is a bit more a la carte. You choose things, you drop them in and it builds this controller, the price goes up and you hit buy and they make it for you. At the time of filming, it's still in beta version, and so you can't really try it out for yourself quite yet, but it looks like it's coming along nicely. And also the price seemed to be, as far as I could work out, relatively under control. So interesting. I mean, do we still sit around hoping to have an individually custom designed for us, just the bits that we need MIDI controller? Or are we more likely to be in a situation where our environment changes, and so we just need something which can change with it, or rather something which can cope with change? So if you specify a MIDI controller to be exactly something for something, it's a little bit like the Sound Force controllers for a single plugin. I mean, is that really what I want? I mean, that works to a different degree because it's mapped specifically to a particular synthesizer plugin, and so it gives you the illusion of hardware for this one thing. But if you're building a MIDI controller which is going to work for your particular workflow as it is right now, will that be able to adapt to your workflow in the future? Will that ultimately change? And perhaps what we really need is something a bit more generic. But then on the other hand, these are big enough. It's not just building a small sort of 8x8 thing. These are large controllers into which you can put all the things that you feel you may need down the line, or a scattering of different things, or a combination of different controllers. I don't know, the mind wanders with this sort of thing, but it's very interesting. It looks like the best go at the whole modular MIDI controller yet, and is well worth checking out. The RYK M185, well, this is my most favorite thing ever. As soon as I saw this appear, I leapt on it. I've already got a video out there showing my entire build of the DIY kit and my first fumblings around with it, but I got a lot more to come on that because it's a fabulous, entertaining and engaging sequencer that everyone should know about it. What is it? Well, the M185 is a sequencer built by RYK. It was originally designed to be part of the Roland System 100. It came about because Jake from RYK was bored with 8-step sequencers. 8 steps in a row going round and round and round ad nauseum, I suppose. And what he wanted to do was introduce some gating and some rhythm into that, so it doesn't have to play every note every time around. In fact, it could stop and play a couple of notes and then move on, or it could skip a note, and we suddenly get a much more interesting sequence, something more akin, I suppose, to the TB303, or more of a sequencer built into keyboards in that way. But this was in modular, designed for the System 100, as I say. And so this was a fair while ago, and time moved on and Eurorack started becoming the thing. And IntelliJail then got in touch with him and ended up building the Metropolis, which was based upon his M185 and has become one of the most popular sequencers on Eurorack. And it's a sort of module which is a little bit too big, a little bit too expensive, and it's the kind of thing you look at and go, oh, that's really, really interesting, but I don't really have the space or the money for that right now. And so you fiddle about with other things. Well, RYK has now released a new and updated evolution of the M185 that's available as an assembled or a kit form, and it's both cheaper and more fully featured than the IntelliJail Metropolis, which is awesome. So I pounced on it, got a kit, built it, made a video, pow, and now I'm exploring it and trying to work out what the heck I'm going to do with it. The interesting thing about it is, as I say, it steps along and then it holds and does another step, and there's all sorts of different gate rhythms and patterns you can put in there. It can hold a long note, it can do staccato. It's not like ratcheting. It's more intelligent than that. It's more interesting and programmable than that, and it just ends up creating these fantastic rhythmic melody lines or bass lines or whatever it is you want to use for it. But it has other facilities built in. It can run 2 sequences at once. It splits itself in half and does 2 4-note sequences, which are interesting. You can patternize those. You can do a bunch of one, then move into the other, then swapping back. It also does MIDI and other bits and pieces. It's a really interesting thing, and I'm really hoping this is going to revolutionize my melody writing on my system. And I mean, the thing that excites me immediately is just being able to stick in a rest. I mean, that seems nuts, doesn't it? But nearly every sequencer on Eurorack just plays all 8 notes. And so to be able to program in a rest, or just to change the rhythm slightly, to vary, to perform and move things about and get it to evolve, very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Look out for more videos I'm going to be doing on that very soon. Now, I've been a big fan of the Omsonic Stochastic Inspiration Generator, or whatever it is it's called, which is this great, marvelously blue looking module that has sliders on individual notes. As you put up the slider, the probability of that note sounding becomes greater. It's a great way of generating melodies. I absolutely love it, and I've been following it ever since it first emerged, I think at the end of last year or the beginning of the year, and it's been tantalizingly out of reach because it's always been coming soon, coming soon. And then I got into a bit of a spat with them because I kept hearing that people have got them and that they've been selling some, and they did a little bit over Superboost saying, oh yeah, it's great and it's out. And I kept get back in touch saying, if it's out, can I have one? And they go, no, it's we don't have any, it's out of stock. And I remember when it first got announced, I said, can I put my name down for one? They said, no, we're not taking pre-orders, you'll have to order them when they're available. So, you know, I check in quite regularly to see whether it's available, and it's not available. And then I find out that people have had it and I haven't been able to buy one, and I don't understand. And then they got in touch and they said, well, no, I mean, if your name's on the list, then it should be fine. I said, but there wasn't a list. I was told there wasn't a list. I wasn't allowed to be on the... Anyway, so I've gone around a bit of circles with that. Slightly frustratingly, because I think it's an awesome module and I'd love to get my hands on it to play with it. And I am denied at the moment, and I don't quite understand why. But anyway, there we go. I think my name's on some list somewhere, and one day perhaps one will become available. In the meantime, Vermona have just stepped up and said, well, we've got one. There you go. And it's out and it's available, and you can go and get one now. Well, that's great. So same idea really. You've got a bunch of sliders. Each one represents a musical note. You push up the slider, and so the probability of that note sounding in the sequence as it goes around is increased. That's really all there is to it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. Again, creating melodies, again, putting in a note or not putting in a note. That kind of randomization. It's like taking a Turing machine and pushing it a lot further and more intentionally, because you can specify the note. That's the musical part of it that really appeals to me. So I can take just 3 notes, and those are the 3 notes I'm going to work on. I mean, you can sort of create the same situation putting a random something from the Turing machine through a quantizer, I suppose. But this, because of the interface and the sliders and you're sort of playing with notes, is that interaction that really appeals to me. But of course there's a lot more to it than just pushing the sliders up. It's got a bunch of knobs for length and legato. You can pepper it with rests in order to introduce rhythms and other bits and pieces. Lots of exciting stuff going on in there. And so similarly, I'd quite like to get my hands on the Vermona one, but I'm also still wedded to this idea of the Omsonic. Yeah, it's a really interesting idea, and I really hope the Omsonic one becomes more available, and that one day I'll finally get my hands on one or the other, or both maybe, who knows. The no control, or the zero control, like the no coast or zero coast or something. Yes, the Make Noise have released this gorgeous little sequencer performance controller thingy. I mean, it's perfect for the no coast. Absolutely. It's a dead ringer for it, works with it. Perfect combination of things. Can it do more is the question. Don't know. So what is it? Well, what you get is a sequencer with 8 touchpads and 3 rows of 8 knobs and a bunch of patch sockets out. There you go. Simple. So you can play a tune on it, or you can sequence a tune on it. You can step through things. You can go one direction or the other. But of course there's more to it than you would think, because this is Make Noise. There's always secret stuff knocking around that you wonder, what on earth is that for? And one day I will find out. Well, that's a no control all over, really. So as a basic sequencer, yeah, that's cool, interesting, good. But when combined with something like the no coast, it then becomes a whole other animal somehow. It has this dynamics system in it. Now, this is something that responds really well to the no coast, because the no coast has this weird dynamics system, which I never understood, which is one of the reasons why I couldn't really keep hold of mine, because I just could not quite open my mind far enough to really get the best out of it. But it's kind of like a velocity system. So you can use one row of knobs from the no control to send control voltage into the dynamics center, into the velocity center of the no coast, and then change the velocity of the noise that's coming out. That's really exciting, obviously. I mean, if this was MIDI, you'd be doing that left, right, and center. But this is not. This is control voltage. And so those things are hard. The only downside being that not many other bits of Eurorack or synthesizers have that kind of dynamic system built in. And so my feeling is that lots of the no control will probably not get used that much. Although, as this is control voltage, you can always do creative things with control voltage. Whatever it's doing, whatever it's supposed to do, you just use it for something else. What? I don't know, a bit of modulation somewhere. Who knows? But there must be creative uses you could use it for. Now, of course, everyone's gone crazy over it because it's mildly innovative, it's certainly quirky and interesting, and is going to give you a new way to play with your system. It's also an external unit, so it's not Eurorack, it's something which sits by itself, which means it could exist on a lot more desktops than just the Eurorack community, which is interesting. And also, actually, when playing with Eurorack, it's quite good to have the sequencer which is separate. You know, that has a lot of things going for it as opposed to having it wired in to your rack, although that has things going for it as well. You know, pros and cons. So if you have a no coast, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's the perfect companion to play those two things together. That's awesome. If you have Eurorack, then yeah, it gives you an interesting new way perhaps of approaching sequencing within your rack. Could be interesting. Otherwise, it looks great and it's just full of that make noise flavor of quirkiness that we all love. Talking of control, Tom from Music Thing has been fiddling around with 4 big knobs called Control. The idea being that if you're fed up with fiddling with little knobs in Eurorack, then this is the sort of thing that you could drop into your control voltage chain to give you something much bigger and fatter to get your fingers on. I mean, you know, we all suffer from little knobs in Eurorack, and so having big knobs is always going to be advantageous, particularly in live performance when you're getting the knobs out and you need something, you know, really to get your teeth into. So the Music Thing Control offers four knobs, and very simply it can output control voltage, and on a nice big highly sensitive, high resolution and expensive knob type of way. But it'll do other things too. You can use the first couple of knobs as attenuators, or you can use them as offsets. It has a change output, which outputs whatever change you make to whatever knob, which is interesting. And another one which does the difference between things. So you can get some unexpected control voltage routing out throughout your stuff just by playing with these things together. And unexpected adventures is kind of what Eurorack is all about. So it kind of provides focused, you know, intelligent, purposeful control voltage manipulation on a nice big finger friendly format, at the same time as outputting slightly strangely random and probabilistically mathematical generations of stuff that's based upon your fiddlings. So it's both purposeful and creative, which is really interesting. Roland Zenology. Now, Roland gets a lot of bad press most of the time for everything. It can't do anything right. However, I've been following this move into Zencore and the transition of stuff that they've done, the trajectory that they're on, and I find it fascinating. Now, I mean, you have to, I think, get to a point where you just get over the idea that Roland are going to release any of their old gear as hardware. You know, they gave it a go with the whole IRA thing, with the System 8 and the System 1. You know, they've tried to engage with the desire for old vintage gear, and they've packed it into that, and they've produced a couple of decent synths for that. They've also got a bit of modular. You know, they've kept that stuff alive, not in the way that people want it, no, but they've attempted to satisfy those sorts of yearnings and urges. And also they've now pushed everything digital and online into their Roland Cloud thing. You subscribe to Roland Cloud every month and you get access to all their digitally modeled versions of their old stuff. So the Junos, Jupiter 8s, 101s, 808s, 909s, it's all there. It's all digital. And that's what they're interested in. They're not interested in putting out an analog through hole component piece of hardware. That's just not what they're about. They want to push boundaries. They want to go to new places. They want to do something different. And nearly everybody hates that. We just want an 808, you know, but you know, other people are doing that, man. You know, we have to move on, I think. So anyway, Zenology, what's that about? Well, with the Jupiter XM and the Jupiter X that they have announced released, not quite released, depending on which version you're talking about, they introduced this concept of the Zen core. Zen core, as far as I can work out, it's just a processing core within these things that can do extraordinary maths and model extraordinary things. So within everything from the MC101, the MC707, the Phantom, the Jupiter X, all these big synthesizers and their little drum machines all have this Zen core technology, which means they can all run the same sounds. Is that what we want? I don't know. So stay with me. What's happened now is that Roland has released a thing called Zenology. Zenology is a software-based, computer-based front end for their entire catalogue of synthesizers and sounds. It can all run within it. Because previously, Roland have modeled all of their stuff using ACB technology. That was analog circuit behavior. So analyze analog circuits, modeled that, stuck that in a computer, and there you have a software SH101, you have a software Juno 106. Brilliant. And you have a hardware version in their boutique stuff, which took that software, stuck it into hardware, and let you play that on this horribly small but hardware thing. Zenology puts it back into the computer. It takes all of that sound generation possibility and remodels all of their hardware. So you get a differently modeled. It goes beyond what ACB does. It goes somewhere else somehow that I can't quite explain. But it's like a next generation of modeling of those synthesizers and stuffs it all into this piece of software. That software can run in any of their new hardware synths as well. So you can make a sound on the Jupiter X and you can run it in Zenology on your computer. And then you can take that and stick it into an MC707 and have it play as part of that live performance set. Roland are heading for a place where everything can run everything, where all of their synthesizers can run any sound you can possibly think of, the same as their software plugins can. And that's amazing. It may not be what you want. Perhaps what you're looking for is a synthesizer that has character. But that's a whole different world to this. What Roland are trying to do is to give you every possibility of every sound ever in either a little box or just on your computer. They want you to have everything. Are we going to then be swimming in presets and find ourselves completely numb from the amount of sound? Well, possibly. But I don't know, that's their pursuit. I mean, the guy from Roland was saying with the release of the Jupiter XM that really all he's ever wanted is a little studio that he can carry around with him and make music wherever he is. And that's what the Jupiter XM was all about. Packed full of sounds, sequencing, you know, off you go. And that's what's driving Roland, is to be able to have every sound available to you in every situation. It's very interesting. So I've signed up to Roland Cloud for the first time, and I'm going to give it a bit of a go. I don't know if I really have the time to justify it, but it's very interesting having a play with their older synthesizers. But all of that is now moving, it's moving beyond them, because when you have a Jupiter 8 plugin or an SH101 plugin, it's confined within the idea and the interface of that instrument. Of course, you can embellish, you can push it in a little bit way, but essentially it's fixed in time. And Roland want to now go beyond that. And so those GUIs, those looks are dropping away, and you're having the Zenology front end. It's not all there yet. They haven't quite got to the Zenology Pro version, which is going to give you the ability to access absolutely every parameter and possibility within all of these old ancient vintage synthesizers. So there will be a Jupiter 8, but it won't look like a Jupiter 8 anymore. It'll look like Zenology, and that'll give you a GUI which is scalable and huge and animated and allow you to get right down into where the synthesis really lies. Will something be lost in that? Oh yeah, inevitably. But it also opens up the potential for a massive range of sounds and sound design. There's a free version of Zenology. You can download it and plug into it. It'll also try to sell you a whole load of other stuff. But just go with the free version, plug it in, and just see what you think. I think it comes with a bunch of half-decent sounds that makes you go, oh yeah, that sounds a lot like an old Roland synth. Cool. So could be cool, maybe not. I know a lot of people do not follow my logic on this at all. But I think once you've embraced the idea that Roland are going to do their own thing, whether you like it or not, then it's a far more interesting journey than you would have thought. Behringer have a monopoly. It's kind of as simple as that, really. Not really anything to embellish upon that. There's no extras, no extraordinary sequencer built in. There's no additional evolution of anything. They've just gone, monopoly from Korg originally is one of the most sought after, perhaps popular little synthesizers. And so Behringer have taken it, recreated it. Looks great, looks more or less the same. They've used the same format as they did for their Poly D in the hinged bit, and that actually looks really nice. It's a nice format. Small keyboard, obviously, that keeps it together, but again, desktop space is at a premium. That's no bad thing. Sounds great, does the job. It's a monopoly. I think that's it. Now, the monopoly follows the same kind of architecture as the Poly D in that you get 4 oscillators, so you've got 4 notes potentially of polyphony, but it's all running through the same filter envelope VCA section, and so it's paraphonically articulated. And at the time of the release with the Korg monopoly, it was very, very well received and used all over the place. Had a really distinct sound, I suppose you could say, particularly with being able to use those 4 notes and the way that sounded as you played them, because you weren't constantly re-triggering envelopes. And that gives it a whole flavour, very similar, I guess, again, to the Poly D. But it has this different sound. And, I mean, to look at it, it just looks really, really nice. And is the sort of thing that perhaps would not be so terrible to have. I don't know. I mean, I wrote an article about it. I suggested that it's perhaps quite interesting. And that article went out onto the internet and I got abuse in return, which is really, really odd. I don't quite understand why people feel the need to get personal with people about their opinions on synthesizers. It just blows my mind, really. I mean, I am fully aware, and you are fully aware, of my opinion on Behringer and their actions and what happened with all of that a little while ago. It seemed to be the most important thing in the world before this COVID-19 pandemic came along, and it's still important. It's still important how companies behave. It's still important how Behringer behaves. But we also have to make choices based on our circumstances, what we need, our budget, and we need to be careful about our glass houses and our hypocrisy and the choices that we make, the people that we bank with, the shops that we buy stuff from, and all the other things in our lives that may not be acting as purely as perhaps we'd like them to. And ultimately, being anti-Behringer, is that the hill that you want to die upon? Or do we need to just kind of move on? I mean, I feel, just to get this out there, that Behringer has actually responded and changed. The flavour I get from them is different now. It's different to how it was. The whole blow up, the blast, the enormous amount of bad feeling that happened around the Peter Curtin thing has, I think, had an effect, hopefully for the good. I mean, Behringer have withdrawn from social media in many ways. They've taken themselves out of forums, they've taken themselves out of a public place, and they've kind of created a slightly more private place. They've created Facebook groups, which you have to ask to enter. And so rather than having shouting matches and arguments out in public, they just want to bring the community together so that they can talk more positively about things. Because ultimately, no one should have to deal with the abuse that is out there from people. It's just awful. And having had a taste of that myself from the anti-Behringer side, not from the pro-Behringer side, from the people who are supposed to be the nice guys who are telling Behringer that they're being nasty, and I'm getting abuse from there, which is just awful. So I can imagine how that marketing team feels. I can imagine how Patrick and Anna and such like, how they feel with the barrage of abuse that they must have received in response to their poorly judged video, I mean, they were idiots. But no one really deserves this level of abuse. No one. I don't think that's right. And it is time, perhaps, to move on. I mean, I respect the fact that Behringer have have tried to change the conversation so that it's not so combative all the time. They did step back, they did apologize, kinda. They did release the copyright they'd placed on Peter Kern's name, and I'd like to think that they are now trying to move forward. What else really can they do? And perhaps we need to do the same. And then treat each product and each company as you find them, as your experience of them are, and just try to see beyond some idiot's stupidness of one time and to see where that takes us from here. So there you go. There's some thoughts on that. Make of that what you will. Now, Air Instruments is a crazy place. I don't really fully understand it, but it's absolutely fueled by a passion for the weird, the glitchy, the noisy, the zany, and it's just nuts out there. And they seem to have a constant flow of new and amazing things. I mean, in the last month, they've had the Space Invader box. It's an Invader box. It makes sort of arcadey type sounds. It's got a couple of buttons and a knob, I think, and then it goes bloop, 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 bloop. Looks great. Space Invader on the front, that kind of thing. Awesome. They've then got this 8-step sequencer, which is kind of in an oval shape that goes around with these wonderful lights underneath that goes around, and then it's got this bonkers glitch button that you hit, and it just goes, and then it goes, and it goes back the other way. You just go, what? Why does it even have that button? What possible you? So yeah, that's nice. And then they've got this other thing that you stick capacitors in the front of that changes values of things in order for you to create new noises of some kind, and then other components and put more noise. And there's thing like there's a blind noise thing which has got two big touch plates on it. The idea being you could do it with your eyes closed and just make noises. I don't know. I wasn't trying to pick out a particular product to say, oh, look at this is awesome. I would just encourage you to go and visit aeroinstruments.com and just check out that stuff, because it's nuts and mad and fabulous and wonderful, crazy, useless, and yet awesome all at the same time. And we need a bit of that in our lives, I think. So while we're waiting for Behringer to come up with their OB-Xa Oberheim clone, Arturia have come along and said, well, here's a software one. It's the whole thing. Here you go. Looks great. Sounds great. It's the whole thing. You can now play Jump and Space 1999. You can now play Jump and 1999 to your heart's content, and it sounds brilliant, and off you go. So thanks for that, Arturia. And they're right. It looks really great. I mean, it's a fabulously analog polysynth in software form as part of their V collection. Well, not quite part of their V collection. If you're already a V collection owner, it will cost you $50. Otherwise, it's about $150 you want to buy it straight up all by itself. But for that, you do get a wonderfully modeled classic analog synthesizer, the sort of thing that we all identify with in terms of that sound, that synth sound, that brassy, paddy, warm, analog, treacly, big chord sound. That is that Oberheim all over, I think. Of course, they've expanded it. They've pushed the back out in order to give you access to more modulation and other crazy bits. No doubt. Effects probably plugged in. Comes with over 400 presets, which are no doubt written and created by awesome people for your preset pleasure. 16 voices of polyphony, cross modulation, reverbs and effects all stuck on the end. Sounds flipping phenomenal. Phosphor 3 is based on the Alpha Centauri synthesizer. No, I'd never heard of it either. Apparently it was a bit of a precursor to the Synclavier, or has something to do with that, or not, or I might just be getting everything really confused. But ultimately, Phosphor 3 from Audio Damage models this idea of additive synthesis using wavetables, noise sources, envelopes, and other bits and pieces. Each oscillator can use 16, 32, or 64 partials, and you have individual levels and randomization over that whole ball game. There's LFOs and panning and cross modulation, and a lot of FM can be driven through it as well. The interface is very sci-fi, very groovy, very unlike what you'd expect to see a vintage digital synth look like, but it does give you a wonderful and engaging way of getting stuck into these partials, because you're talking about lines of loads of stuff. Additive synthesis is all about bringing in overtones and harmonics and bringing in more and more tones. And the Phosphor 3 interface, I think, really does a good job of giving you access to all that. I've got a soft spot for Voltage Modular, really quite like it. I enjoyed it when it first came along. I haven't been able to spend as much time with it as I would perhaps like, but it's now rolled up to version 2. What does that mean? Well, it means endless patch sockets. They had this thing, right? When you click on a patch socket, it created 6, like it had an instant molt built in. So you could go from any patch socket to 6 other things. Now it's released the cap on that, so you can keep on going forever. You can keep on plugging more and more cables into that single source or single destination, which phenomenally generates more and more ideas, I suppose. I mean, you can do this in hardware with molts, so you can do it in any other piece of software with molts and bits and pieces like that. But the ease of this, it just removes a whole other stage. The other thing they've done is created this idea of buses, which I suppose is a little bit like the CV bus in a make noise case, in that you create a bus and whatever you route to it gets routed to whatever else is routed to it. So you can take a single source and stuff that out to lots of different destinations. Again, it's a bit like using a molt. It's just something which you can kind of put in behind the scenes, so you're not having to put lots of molt modules around the place. It gives you the opportunity to tidy up and keep those sorts of things under control, while at the same time still having them very much visually represented on the front, because as you hover over a patch which is going to a bus, all the bus bits and pieces all light up, which is interesting. The more I think about it, the more, I don't know, I think there are pros and cons to these things, because the thing about Voltage Modular is that they seem to understand that because it's software, you can do things that you can't do in hardware. So you can very easily create shortcuts to things like the never-ending patch socket, like the buses. And that, while making the environment simpler and perhaps allowing for more complex things, it does in some ways detract from what you're trying to do with modular, which is trying to fight your way around the limitations. You keep things simple because it's better to keep things simple, if you know what I mean, because you create simpler things and your journey is simpler. Your journey takes you to places where you probably would have bypassed if you can just go straight for a preset. But because you can't go straight for a preset, although of course you can in Voltage Modular, that you have to find your way. And so I think there's this dynamic going on, this push and pull between simplifying things because it's software, doing innovative things because it's software, and judging whether that's becoming too software-like and you're losing the joy of the hardware interface. Does that make any kind of sense at all? I don't know, it's just some thoughts. In any way, it's an interesting thing for Voltage Modular to have done. The other great thing is that they've toned down the Fisher Price a little bit. I mean, it's kind of a little bit Duplo. The color choices, the palette is a bit kind of, it's a little bit like Reason was, for instance, when it first came out. And it just feels a bit cartoony. With version 2, they've darkened it a little bit, they've chilled things out, they've made it somehow look more professional, and that's a really good thing. Another thing they've built in is audio capture, so you can just hit record and record what you're doing. Brilliant. Why was that not there in version 1? And they've also now got variations on a patch. So you've got a patch, and you can save that as a variation within that patch, and then do a couple of changes, save that as a variation within that patch. You think, okay, well, it's just like saving presets within presets. Yes, but you can then CV control yourself between variations. So you can go from patch to patch, essentially. You're not loading up a whole new patch, you're just doing a variation of cabling within a patch. And you can control that via CV and have that going and step sequence through it or something crazy. So you can go completely from different patch to different patch. Again, not something you could do in hardware. So that's very interesting. The other thing they've done, I should mention, is they've added a couple of extra instruments, which include this DCO, they're calling it, which is essentially a Juno synth voice. But that looks amazing, and that's an entire synth voice that you could drop into your modular. And along with that, they've added a lot more polyphonic modules as well, because they have this polyphonic cabling system also within there, which is pretty genius. So Voltage Modular continues to be far deeper than you'd ever think, cheaper than it really should be, which is awesome, and a lot of fun to play with. And finally, the prolific ST Modular has a whole other thing up his sleeve. I mean, he's been producing modules like there's no tomorrow. This guy, more and more stuff. There's another one. Okay, so his latest thing, right, is 0 HP. Now, what's 0 HP? That doesn't sound like anything sensible. Well, no, the idea is that it's Eurorack modules outside of your racks. They don't take up any HP at all. Now, normally up to now, we've seen a few things like passive mults and logic gates because they don't require any power. Because once you take out of the case, you can't power it. Now, ST Modular thought, I think there's something we can do about that. So what he's done, he's created a little 2 HP power supply. So you do have to give up 2 HP for this whole thing. So that goes in your rack and is properly powered. And from that, you take a little cable and you plug that into these little boxes he's been developing that sit outside. It's really quite genius. So he's got a little mixer, a little 6-channel mixer, crossfader, bits and pieces. He's got a couple of LFOs, and the other one actually is a mult, but it's a mult which is powered and also switchable and cross switchable or something. Anyway, a couple of nice little boxes, which if you've got a small rack, you haven't got room for more stuff. I mean, the mixer in particular is a gorgeous, just a little 6-channel mixer, ideally for CV, he says, although it'll do audio as well. And that could be really useful. In fact, you could have a couple of them, one for CV, one for audio. That's interesting. And that can create all sorts of different modulations. Or if you just need a couple more LFOs, to just tack that on the side and have it sitting there, add that in. Brilliant. What a great little thing. So that'll do. I think that's plenty for May. Sorry if I missed anything that was awesome to you, of course. You know, I can't cover all things, but why don't you bring that along to our chat? Yes, we're going to have a live stream chat on the 31st. That's Sunday, this Sunday, 8 o'clock, British Standard Summertime, whatever that is. 8 o'clock, live stream chat, you and me. Come and bring your ideas and your thoughts about the things that I missed out, or we'll talk about stuff, or maybe we'll make some music. Who knows? Everyone is welcome to come. We can talk about software, hardware, music making, modular, synthesizers, audio interfaces, MIDI controllers, anything you want. Or I'll just chat. I'll just keep on talking for a couple of hours, drink some beer and see where it leads us. I do have more live stream chats with interesting people planned for the future. I've got one in a couple of weeks with Tim Exile from Endless, as they are launching their Kickstarter for their desktop version of Endless in a week or so. And in a couple of weeks, I think sometime around June the 15th, we're getting together for a bit of a chat. So do look out for that. And I might be able to drop in others at other points. Not quite sure yet. I still haven't quite come up with a plan on exactly how that's going to work. What else is coming up? Well, I have videos on the M185 coming along. I've got the review of the Stocky Ratchet drum machine. I've got Bafako Perkle to build. I've got the Deckard's Dream to finish. I've got wonderful, interesting videos on how to choose a laptop, on tweaking Windows. I've got the Sensel Morph to review. Plenty of stuff. And if you like what I do, please do share and tweet it out there and subscribe and all those usual sorts of things. We hit 30k. We hit 30,000 subscribers. That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along and joining me in this bonkers journey. And of course, enabling me to keep on going. Keep on going. Keep at it, you fool. Keep going. It'll work one of these days. If you'd like to help me make it work, then I do have a Patreon thing that you can come and join in and join my merry little band there and throw me a couple of dollars. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. So yeah, join in. That would be great. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.